Hey folks, as you probably recall, my mom passed away about exactly a month ago. I'm grieving that loss. That's something that takes a long time if you haven't been through it before, and of course, many of you I'm sure have. It was interesting the other day, somebody compared a thing that they were grieving in a negative sense to my own loss. They talked about their grief over the loss that they had in a lesser way to what I was feeling. Nothing further could be true. I mean, grieving is an individual experience in my way of thinking. It doesn't matter what you're grieving. If you're grieving, you're grieving. And it's a rough spot to be in. That's kind of what I'm going through right now. And I thought I would share things not to say to people that are grieving, and then correspondingly things that you can do and say that are likely to be more helpful. I would start off by saying that this is my experience, and these are things that in some ways have upset me at times, but at the same time, in the past, before I had these experiences, I might have said any or all of these things to somebody. Many people will come up to you after such an incident, the loss of a loved one, or a divorce, or a particularly bad breakup, or the loss of a job, any number of things that you could be grieving. All of those have a little bit of a different feel to them, but they're still grief, and so it's something that needs to be processed. What people will come up to you and say, they're really honestly trying to make you feel better, but they don't know necessarily what to say because perhaps they haven't experienced anything like this, or come from families or backgrounds where just the usual things are said. I'll just go through this list, and again, I'm not criticizing anyone who's ever said these things because I've probably said a lot of them myself. I've learned a bit more over the years and having experienced these things myself. So I'll just start off with the first one that I have. What happened? Particularly for me, somebody asking me how somebody passed away or how something like that happened really brings it all back in the moment. Like right now, I find myself in a kind of a particularly edgy, like my emotions are just under the surface with a lot of this, and it takes just a little spark for me to really get sad or even angry at folks over things like this. And I can do it to myself also, not without great difficulty. So asking what happened is just not really helpful in that situation. The second one I have is everything happens for a reason. This is something that I've heard a lot of people say, and it has a quasi-religious connotation to it. And that may be reassuring to some people who have that their religion provides them with hope and reassurance. But for most people, I immediately think, well, okay, so some supernatural being thought that they should kill my loved one. If you know the person well and you believe that they would be reassured by that, absolutely, that's something that you could say. A related point is it's part of God's plan, or it's all part of the plan. Very similar kind of vibe to that, in that, oh, well, what plan is that? And what part am I in that plan? I mean, these thoughts just kind of race to your minds when people say these things, at least for me. If someone is from a faith tradition that would be reassured by that, then perhaps that is the right thing to say. The fourth one that I wrote down is their suffering is over now. That just, again, it kind of like the first one about what happened, it brings it back. When you've been in the room with death, it's an amazing experience. It's a sad experience. It's also something that I don't want to be a part of very often. Bringing that up in that context really can be upsetting in a lot of ways. Incidentally, every one of these has been said to me either during this particular grieving experience or when my dad passed away or when my sister died. All of these things have been said to me. And generally, my reaction is just go, thank you very much, and, move on. There's really no point because they are really trying to be helpful. The next one is my, brother, sister, wife, mother, dad lived for this long or died this way. A lot of people do this, and I've done this too in many situations where someone will have a story and I will relate something that seems similar to me in a way to relate to them. Usually that's kind of a good thing to do, but in this particular circumstance, I'm kind of left like, okay, well, good for you. It's more perplexing than anything else. The sixth one, again, sort of related back, quasi-Christian spirituality versions is he, she, or they is looking down on you. Not everybody, I'm not going to take that poorly, but there are people who would. Maybe skip that one. And the seventh one, which kind of has a caveat, is when's the service? Now, that's a very normal thing for people to ask. The service or the celebration of life. In my particular situation at this time, I don't have the bandwidth to do that. And there really is no reason for anyone to have anything quickly other than a sense of closure for a community or a group of people or perhaps a family. And if that's important, absolutely, that's not a question that is a difficult one to answer for a lot of people. In my case, and in others that I've known, it's not the right question to ask because all it does is kind of raise that, well, I've got to be putting on this event and doing all these things. And speaking for myself, after my dad passed away, it was about a month, 6 weeks later that we had a celebration of life. Be able to organize that in that span of time with a few other people. In this particular case, there's a lot more bureaucratic things, I suppose, that have to be done after someone dies when I'm the last one. I'm the only child. And so I've got a lot to do, and I have a job. Thus, I can't really spend the bandwidth and practice self-care to do all of those things at once. And so what I've done in my mind is to say, okay, I'm not even going to think about that now until I reach a point where I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm in a better place to be able to visualize what that might be and how I might do that. And I'm really committed to that. It's like a boundary for me. But when anybody comes up and asks me that question, then I have to say pretty much exactly what I said to you, which basically leaves people kind of perplexed. They really don't. They're like, what? Most people are used to someone dies, you have a funeral, things are brought to some sense of resolution, where I don't feel for me that that's necessary. So again, if that's very common and that's a tradition and that's what people that do and that you're definitely planning to do that, that's an easy question to answer. But it's also a fact that if you are someone who knows that person well, you're going to hear about when the service is anyway. So it might be best just to skip that one. Another thing that a lot of people say, and this is another one that's kind of a little bit a mixed bag, sometimes it's the right thing to do and sometimes it isn't. If the people will say, well, let me know if there's anything I can do. And my immediate reaction to that, which may be yours, may not be, is like, well, what would you want to do? Exactly what could I ask you to do? Like, I'm an adult, I take care of things, I don't need anybody to go to the grocery store for me or do something. That's where my mind goes. That said, one of the things that I have learned through this particular process is that I can ask people like, hey man, how about if we go out to lunch? How about if we go and do this? Because I need that connection with other people more than I need somebody to, bring me something or go get me something or whatever it happens to be. That's been a much more valuable thing for me, to have that sense of connection to others, as opposed to, asking for something or just being, oh, no, I'm good. And people will do that, and that's been nice. In the past, before I learned more about how to reflect and learn about myself, and learn about how I react to things emotionally, I would have been like, nope, I'm good, got it all under control. That's how I would have responded to that. 6 months later, I would find myself, kind of in a depression, because I had sort of suppressed that need for connection with others through that time. Because I've mentioned this in a few other videos, the way I used to react to things is to take responsibility for them and then do the things in a professional way as possible. I don't need to feel the need to do that now, as you might guess from my previous answer about when is the service. But I can ask people to reach out and to connect with me and to go out and do things that are fun and that break that kind of tension of living through an experience like this. Flipping that around, what is the best thing to say, or what are some good things to say or do for somebody who's grieving? A really nice thing to say is, I heard about whatever loss the person has suffered, and I'm thinking about you. That's a very nice thing to say. And people mean it. I've heard people say this, and that's like something that doesn't bring into any of those value kind of judgments that some of the other ones might. Another thing that has been a nice experience for me over the last month is somebody who has come up and said, I knew your mom at this point, and this is something that she did that really meant a lot to me. Like, hearing those stories was very touching and reassuring to me, to hear how she had impacted people's lives in ways that even I didn't know, was really kind of a cool thing to experience. And several people have come up to me and shared those things, which is kind of a humbling thing, and also a very warm thing to say for me. Calling or texting the grieving person just to say, hey, I'm checking on you, just seeing how you're doing. Or even to send memes or funny things or stuff like that. Speaking for myself, I need distraction from this, because I'm going through it, I'm acknowledging it, but it's sad and it's weird. I'll make another video about grieving here in a few weeks or so. I'm not quite ready to go there yet. So calling or texting or checking on somebody, I think, is absolutely a great thing. And certainly I've appreciated those people who have taken a moment to reach out. Many people feel like, oh, well, I don't want to bother them. Oh, please. In my case, please bother me. It's fine. Another nice touch that perhaps isn't quite as audacious as calling or texting is to just write a card and mail it to them. And that's kind of old school, but I've received a number of cards over the last month from folks that have similarly shared those kind of really nice stories and hopes and wishes for me that I've really appreciated. Consensual hugs, if you're in a public spot for that, are also, at least for me, welcome. That's a nice way to connect with somebody in that way. And finally, and this is very old school, is bringing food. Speaking for myself, I live by myself. I've got a girlfriend and we get together and everything, but most of the time I live by myself. I can cook, But cooking for one person is sometimes seems wasteful, and it's sometimes easier just to grab some cheese and eat a yogurt or something. But, when somebody brings you like some soup or some kind of meal that's been cooked and all of that sort of thing, my girlfriend brought a meal the other day, and how nice is that? Just for somebody to take that time. I mean, I really do think that cooking and food and love and connection are all sort of interrelated in a lot of ways. And so that's a nice thing to do for people. If you can cook, it's a good idea. If you could bring a pizza, that's also probably acceptable for most people too. That kind of effort says a lot and is definitely appreciated. I hope that this has been helpful for everybody. Again, this is my personal experience and my kind of from both sides of the equation of being someone who walks up to someone like, I don't know what to say here. I've gone up to people and not known what the right thing to say was and said the wrong thing and felt like it was an awkward encounter versus having people come up to me like that, and then correspondingly having had people come up to me and say the right things, which made me feel like I was a part of and connected to others, and that it was a warmer experience and I felt the love in it. And to be able to give that to other people, I think, is really important too. If you are happy to be grieving and going through this, please know that you have my respect. And as I noted, I'll have a video about my grieving experience here in a few weeks, and I'm ready to make that. So thank y'all, and thank you for taking some time to spend with me here watching my videos. I really appreciate the support and hope you have a great day or night wherever it is that you are. Thank you.